Hey folks, this is Jeremy. You're about to hear part of a three-parter episode that we recorded with Derick Varn. If you'd like to hear the entire episode, you can do so right now by heading to patreon.com/givingthemic.
So why do you think there's been a renewed interest in conspiracy culture to kind of bring, because left-wing conspiracy culture has been, I feel like it's kind of died down until recently, although the resurgence of certain kinds of Marxist-Leninism, and I'm not even going to tar all Marxist-Leninists with this brush, even though, you know, I like to tar them with all kinds of brushes sometimes, but it's not all of them. But there's a certain amount of, like, resurgence in conspiracy thinking there because, you know, it's very easy to think everything ever bad said about the Soviet Union is a bourgeois conspiracy. But it seems like truthorism and that sort of thing has been almost solely ceded to the right. Am I wrong about that? I mean, like, it's just it's very interesting how, like, in Trump world, a lot of stuff that was kind of the countercultural right is you can hear it on Fox News now.
Well, Jeremy and I were actually talking about this before the podcast started, but I was actually making the argument that a lot of the Russiagate stuff is actually a left-wing conspiracy. Oh,
it's a left liberal conspiracy, but yes.
I would not describe it as left-wing because most of the people, you know, it's
yeah, okay, it's a left, in parentheses, American left.
It's a liberal conspiracy. Yeah. I separate the two, but I'm pedantic. So
but to avoid that, it does actually bleed over into some left circles, but not as much. And the issue with dealing with Russiagate is, like, every third or fourth thing is kind of true. Like, for sure, there are Russian bot mods and stuff messing with Facebook. For sure, 100%. But it probably didn't matter.
Yeah.
Like,
that's the scale. It's the scale and the culpability that kind of falls apart for a lot of the stuff. It's like, yeah, they did fuckery, but, like, everybody did it, like, all the time. And even, like, what was it? There's some like liberal American businessman even who was, like, you know, trying to like, I guess, do his own experiment, threw his own money at it too, and even, like, tried to, like, screw around with some election shit just to prove it to himself or something. And it was, yeah.
Sure, but that's a far cry from Putin has blackmail material on Trump, and also there was a major sale of a Russian oil company that was used to pay off somebody else, and that it's basically just collusion from top to bottom.
Well,
that's almost impossible, right? I mean, like, I don't know. What were you about to say, Jeremy?
I was going to say, I think the collusion bit comes in because I think that's the thing in terms of and we can tie this into the earlier thing we were mentioning about the dramatic over amplification of stakes and effects. It's kind of a thing where just kind of like pedestrian, that's probably better. Like, you know, just garden variety, bog standard, you know, international business fuckery goes on, and just for, like, really boring, dumb shit, but not like, it's kind of a thing where the reason why, and because, again, this theory, you know, because all these theories serve a purpose, it gets lammed onto because it fills the gap of, like, hey, wait a minute, why did the election go that wrong? Oh, it must be, you know, it's, and
it couldn't possibly be that Hillary Clinton specifically didn't appeal to one Midwestern state's, you know, working class demographic, which was the only working class demographic that even voted for Trump, and only did on the margins because most people didn't vote at all. No, it couldn't be that. It must be Russia.
That's the thing, is, like, the you know, there was and was it Aaron Gupta talked about this, but it was a similar of, like, how both, you know, like 8 years earlier with Obama showing up and all of a sudden, like, him getting elected and kind of just, you know, rupturing this, you know, the entire, like, conservative worldview, like, they, you know, they thought that they had it down, and all of a sudden, so this guy kind of, like, out of nowhere with that name, you know, the black guy from Hawaii does this, and it's kind of a thing where, like, oh wait, you know, maybe we're wrong, but we can't be. So, oh wait, he must be, you know, he's an external. He's got to be a foreigner. He's got to be from out. Our concept of the system is sound. It's just like this foreign threat came in and fucked everything up.
Yeah, I mean, there is this mirror trend.
With a lot more racism, yeah.
And this isn't new. And in some ways, what's worrying about it is actually that low-key stuff that's happened in the past. Like, I think about all the conspiracy theories about voting fraud during the Bush years, right? They weren't even that conspiratorial. We had plenty of, evidence that voting patterns were messed up in Florida. They almost always are.
Yeah, the state. Well, the state of talking about electronic voting, paperless voting in the state of Georgia in the fucking 2018 or 20. When was that? When was 2018? The governor election and many other elections in the statewide elections in Georgia alone.
Oh
last year.
with the Secretary of State who's in charge of elections being the person running, and yeah. Oh yeah. And Georgia's not, and like there were gaps in security and stuff that were there, but I will also admit that, like, watching New York Magazine publish an article basically accusing Trump of being a Soviet spy, as if there's consistency from 1987 Soviet Union to now.
The foreign Slavic threat, like he's fucking Nikolai Volkov or something.
I mean, that's nutty. Like, and look, it made me really feel weird because, for example, I've been talking about, let's say, Alexander Dugin for like 10 years. Okay? Nobody cared. And what was funny is when I was talking about him, he actually was a lot more powerful in Russia. He's actually been marginalized for about 4 or 5 years now. But you wouldn't know that from all the liberals all of a sudden discovering him. When I was talking about him, the only people who would write about him were either very far leftist in Eastern Europe, who just kind of knew about the National Bolshevist threat, and which he was kind of came out of. People who were leftists who kind of liked him, which was concerning. And by that I don't mean liberals, I mean leftists. Right. And like neoconservatives who were looking to stoke war with Russia. That was the only people who cared. And then all of a sudden, like during this conspiracy theory time, like you would think that he was like Rasputin to Putin, even though like Putin kind of had him removed from his Moscow University post and stuff. Like it's not just like nutty, it's like factually wrong. It shows a complete disregard for actually knowing what's going on in Russia.
How much of do you think the freakout is just due to the class position and background of the people who make up the vast majority of American like establishment news media? Because the take that I always had on it was that all of a sudden you had a lot of extremely comfortable people, the punditariats who kind of mistake their own feelings of comfort or of they
think Manhattan. I mean, I'm going to crap on the DSA here. You must forgive me, but they are to Manhattan what the DSA is to Greenpoint. Yeah. So what do I mean by that? They kind of assume. Huh?
No, I was gonna say Jacob shrugged at that, but it's a I understood the reference, but it's kind of a thing. All of a sudden, you have a bunch of really not too ideological people, but who were paid to like talk about this shit, and all of a sudden they were proven wrong, and they felt extremely uncomfortable about this, and so they have when you need an explanation, that's where the speculation comes in.
And they don't know many working class people who don't vote, right? And they also kind of assume that everybody believes the media because they also kind of have invested in that because that's their own self-importance. Yeah, I mean that for sure is part of it, but that's not all of it. I mean, like watching. I gotta admit, watching left liberals turn on Russia today was weird. Like, you remember during Occupy days, RT could do no wrong, even when it like was having Richard Spitzer on stuff before anyone knew who he was. Another thing that came out of all this,
right? RT they had Ed Schultz after MSNBC kicked him off. I think they even still carry Tom Hartman.
Yeah.
Who's been kind of at least a progressive. Yeah, I could call it broadcaster out of Portland since he moved out here in the last 15 years. But yeah.
Well, I mean, the thing with RT is the same thing with like Radio Free Europe in a way. Like they would occasionally get real like decent journalists, even though they were state-sponsored media organ. I mean, and they are, but that wasn't totally what was driving them. I mean, one of the things I like to talk about is Al Jazeera does pretty good news in English. Its news in Arabic's actually very, very different. That's not a conspiracy. But it is sort of like tied into like Qatari interests are different in English than they are in Arabic.
Well, I mean, with both of those institutions, though, there's been a pretty substantial shift in their organizational structure over the years. And
oh, yeah, for sure.
I mean, I don't think it's particularly conspiratorial to say that both have taken more aggressive positions on things after having established their credibility that they might not have in earlier days.
For sure. Although what was interesting is, like, Al Jazeera has lost some credibility over that, but not to the extent that Russia Today has.
Yeah, sure.
And frankly, I don't know what, RT's other language, I've never really looked into its other language coverage. But from living in the Middle East, I could tell you that, and knowing people who read Arabic, that Al Jazeera Arabic is a very different animal than Al Jazeera in English.
Yeah. Similarly, if anybody wants a domestic, a very much more local example, compare CNN International to CNN America, and
it's very different.
It's like it's the difference between like the BBC versus Fox News. To take up two semi-random examples, but yeah, it's.
Well, even Fox News, there was a piece in the New Yorker by, I believe, Jane Meyer, who talked about how there's been a pretty substantial shift there as well. That's been fascinating too. Like it's hard to think of Sheldon Adelson being like a force for moderation, but apparently he was in English. So, I mean, in America, like he was worried about them losing their fig leaf of some credibility. And this is actually, interestingly, they talk about business conspiracies, but like a lot of the fig leaves at News Corp worldwide have fallen in the last few years, not just in America. So that's been interesting to see. But you are right in the sense that I think Russiagate, I mean, particularly to the extent that you hear, like, I will admit, I tried to listen to Rachel Maddow. I was on Stitcher, and I peruse, like, I try to keep up with what liberal punditocracy is saying. Like, I've been fascinated by, for example, Vox's co-opting and weakening of DSA talking points. So I listened to that stuff, and so Rachel Maddow came up on my show, and it felt like I was listening to Alex Jones, but like classier.
Yeah, the Adam Johnson and Nima Shiraz on Citations Needed, did a thing about how, like, her freaking out about, God, what was it? Foreign control over, was it power systems in the Great Plains or in like North Dakota or Nebraska, and like somehow they could get in there and cut off. What if the electricity was cut off and all these people suddenly had to froze? And what if the sinister Russian forces or something, and it was this.
This is the director of national intelligence telling us all in unclassified form, in black and white, China and Russia can do this today, now, whenever they want to. In other words, we're relying on their good graces that they're not. And it is like negative 50 degrees in the Dakotas right now. What would happen if Russia killed the power in Fargo today? Right? What would happen if all the natural gas lines that service Sioux Falls just poofed on the coldest day in recent memory, and it wasn't in our power whether or not to turn them back on? I mean, what would you do if you lost heat indefinitely as the act of a foreign power?
Hell yeah, I love this song. This is my coast-to-coast AM shit right here. Yeah. Next up, Solar
exactly.
Flares.
Talk, entire two. God, that show, they'd have 3-hour conversations about harp.
Yeah, and it ruled.
The thing is, here's one of the interesting things I've always been fascinated about. There does seem to be something in the media landscape. Like, I listened to Coast and Coast AM for, I don't know, like 10 years when I was up. It was kind of irony listening, but one thing that's made this conspiracy stuff a little bit more interesting is there's always been conspiracy kind of thinking, but this idea that you could troll yourself into, from an insincere kind of irony listening to believing it, seems more prevalent than it used to be. Because like, I'm pretty sure that a lot of, Coast to Coast was people listening to it somewhat ironically,
right.
or
Well, I mean, Coast to Coast was complicated in that way, though, because I listened to some episodes ironically, and I listened to some completely sincerely. I mean, George Knapp, in my opinion, is a solid investigator who does good work.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's true for a lot of things. Like, I'm trying to think of an example, but Did
George take over from Art? Who's the guy? Who was the main weeknight guy who took over from Art?
George Norrie.
Okay, there we go. George Norrie versus George Knapp.
Big difference.
Yeah,
big difference.
Similarly, like Ian Punnett, who did like, I think Friday. He did like either like Friday or Saturday night. He did like one night off, and Ian I liked because Ian would actually call guests out on their shit to the anyway.
Yeah, Punnett's still kicking around, I think.
Yeah, I think he had to. I know he had to quit. He had to either quit or dramatically scale back broadcasting due to it's either something with his voice or something with his hearing.
Turn your volume down, folks.
Yeah.
Do you think something maybe had to do? Maybe this has to do with something that's systemic, aka YouTube algorithms? Because for example, when I do research on anything, including left-wing research, eventually a Sargon of Akkad video will somehow show up in my next up feed.
I think it's all, at some point it's patterns, and it's
right, exactly.
There is no such thing as an ironic click.
I think there's somebody at YouTube who's directing you to those videos specifically, like you.
You, Homer Simpson. Anyway.
But I mean, that's something I've really thought about, because, for example, I've been told if you look my name up on YouTube, it's not very long before you hit a far right video that I don't have anything to do with.
Well, that's true, but that's almost for anything related to like culture or politics. I mentioned this before, but it's either an episode of Trash Future or Hacks, which is a kind of a Canadian leftist like techie podcast. They did an entire episode of trying to see like how it's almost like a 6 degrees type of thing of how long between you look at any video on any topic and start following through the suggestions, how long before that took you to videos that explicitly started talking about lizard people.
Well, I mean, this is essentially conspiratorial thinking, though, isn't it? I mean, how is this meaningfully different from Devin Nunes thinking that there's somebody at Twitter mashing the promote Devin Nunes' mom Twitter account versus his?
Well, what is it that Zizek used to say? One of the problems with conspiracy thinking is not paranoid enough. I mean,
yeah.
And in some real sense, I think this is true here. I don't think anyone is actively programming YouTube to throw up right-wing videos, but I do think it's not hard for watching stochastic trends in the algorithm for people to figure out what hashtags to put in to get them to come up on almost everything. Yeah. And you can figure that out just by trial and error. It's like the difference between intelligent design and evolution.
Well, sure, but you're not dealing with the system that. I mean, let me start over. With these systems, though, you do have somebody who's in control of them. So if that is happening and it continues to happen, then someone is making a conscious choice to let that continue to happen.
Well, but there's a thing where the difference between a malefactor versus a system of like someone deliberately like forcing you to see this stuff versus just it's kind of like, as we mentioned way back, God, almost 2 hours ago or something. We mentioned like fucked up actuarial tables trickling down through the years, but it's still in existence. It's almost a thing of like who is the one, is there someone actively and intentionally doing this, or is it just kind of a side effect of systems that were put into place a while ago?
But I don't think with something like this there's a meaningful difference, though, because if you have a smaller system like Twitter where we know for a fact that a certain thing is happening, and the CEO of Twitter knows that a certain thing is happening, and he allows it to continue to happen, then it is something that originally was systemic, but has now become a conscious decision.
Well, it's interesting. This is where I have to really kind of think about Twitter or YouTube, where they are selective in what they ban. Like I was somewhat taken aback by I get why they were, the Sandy Hook stuff being particularly egregious, but why they banned Alex Jones, but I couldn't justify what they didn't ban. Like, Jonathan Bowden.
Who?
Yeah, you see, you don't know, that name's not famous, but he's dead. But, he has
sounds like
tons
he got
of
banned
videos
pretty hard then.
that are put up by people like Richard Spencer. You can still find that stuff on all those accounts, and it's not like some of those people aren't famous, but Jonathan Bowden isn't. So say you block Richard Spencer, but you don't block Jonathan Bowden's accounts or people who post from it because you don't know about him. Well, Bowden was in some ways is more virulent than even Richard Spencer is, but you can still find him on YouTube really easily. And there's also like that's difficult to deal with for two reasons. One, it's almost impossible if you're banning people specifically and not ideas. It's going to be very hard to catch everybody because you simply don't know who they all are. And two, banning ideas on a thing like that would be very unpalatable. But there are live actors who are also playing a Red Queen game with the algorithm to get around it. That's even true for Alex Jones. Like there are ways that Jones got around his ban. Yeah, it's not saving his business model at all.
Hang on, what's a Red Queen maneuver?
Where you are constantly running because you're never going to arrive there. It's from
Through the Looking Glass.
It's from Through the Looking Glass. But anyway, yeah. So there's kind of a game of, or you can think of it as a game of cat and mouse, where like as soon as you change one variable to block these people out, they figure out another way around the code that you just did. But in the case of Twitter, it's harder because they are so selective. Like it seems like sporadic who they do and don't tolerate, and largely based on who they're getting a lot of flack for tolerating.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I think, something you talked about, how just all the deaths during like early Stalin era Soviet Union, how much of it was like it's kind of a thing where the intentional bad actor versus how much it was just people fucking up because they didn't know what they were doing and had no idea that they didn't know that what they were doing. Which I think with like Twitter, a lot of it is, as people pointed out, the most sensible option is that, to a certain mindset, these people, fundamentally do not understand like their own network or the people who use their network, much less how to control it.
But one thing I will grant Jacob that he's got a valid point on is that by my heuristic, a Twitter conspiracy is more viable than, say, a mass government one, because you only need a few coders.
That's true.
You wouldn't even need to have a coder at the top. You just need somewhere a couple of sympathetic coders to throw in some monkey wrenches into that algorithm, and it's possible without a whole lot. So that's the other thing about these private systems, right? Like, they're private.
Yeah.
Which is why I think we see the conspiracy theories manifesting with them as often as we do, because we have so little information that we have to fill in the gaps somehow. So it's only natural that you see both people on the left and the right immediately rushing to these grand narratives about why their favorite poster got kicked off.
Yeah, the reason why my grandchildren refuse to, comment on my posts is, God, I don't want to say, really shitty racist ass posts, and it is because I must have been shadow banned. That's the only reason why, because everyone loves me,
Yeah, one of the things I found interesting, and this is in contradiction to my Angela Nagel, because Nagel was very interested in the 4chan Reddit, and she seemed to imagine that all these a lot of this right-wing conspiracy and transgression culture was really young. But the recent demographic studies on this is actually that they're not. They're overwhelmingly over 55.
Yeah, I think that definitely changed, because Something Awful was definitely, I was one of the older folks on there. And Lotax was even a couple years younger than me, and then all of a sudden these bulletin, all these bring back message boards, folks, fuck social media. But these things, they go on, and at some point 4chan spins out, because there was a mass purging of a bunch of people who were into certain kinds of, let's just say illegal and kind of inappropriate hentai. 4chan spins out, and it kind of these networks take a life on their own.
Yeah, but their age demographic changed. I mean, I was looking at like fake news posts, and they are those, for example, there are good stats that those are overwhelmingly shared by people over 55.
Yeah.
Another thing about this conspiracy culture stuff is, and I talked about this in my conversation with J.G. Michael, Watergate happened, and a lot of these people still have that as their set point. I mean, which is funny, though, because you see a very similar trend with a lot of people sharing the fake news and coming out of this conspiracy theory culture actually supporting the president. Now, I say this as I also think that Russiagate's conspiratorial thinking, but like in the scale that it's taken. I mean, frankly, I would be very, very, very surprised if Mueller didn't find some evidence of collusion because of Trump's business, but I would be also surprised if it mattered to the outcomes at all.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the trick, isn't it? Of like realizing that it's all a matter of scale. That it's this, or well, yeah, not so much of nature, but of scale. It's like this shit isn't. It's not a John le Carré novel. It's a fucking. It's a Coen Brothers movie.
Yeah, exactly.
It's idiots. It's high-powered idiots doing idiotic, greedy shit, and doing like just extremely dumb, bog-standard, corrupt. Like I said, fucking Kushner trying to sell his that ability he has to. God, what I think he tried to sell it to like some Saudis for a while, and also to some of the Russians, and I still don't, or maybe even like the Chinese or something. I still don't know. I don't think anybody actually knows who it was, but it's kind of a thing where, yeah, these are they're just regular, like, just schmucks doing schmuck shit.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure, like, historically speaking, with most administrations, you would find schmucks doing schmuck shit, unless someone came pretty much solely out of the public sector. So I mean, and plus, I don't know. So I guess my takeaway from this is that it's very hard now to even like figure out what a reasonable and unreasonable conspiracy is, other than looking at scale. Like, how many people would be involved? Because I have a hard time believing that you're going to keep more than 200 people quiet, ever.
Yeah.
Like, but you could keep 3 people quiet. Like, well, that's not that hard.
Yeah. One of the things that I did want to ask, I guess in terms of just, because again, it's in the, that's the real trick now is learning the evaluation is, can you walk us through like how to explain to somebody, like how to, tips on how to determine something, going back to like Bayesian probability, how to determine if something is more likely or less likely?
Does it involve a scale of people larger than a mid-sized extended family? Because one, that's going to be most people's scale for what they know, and if you make that reference, they can kind of get how hard it is to keep those people silent, particularly if you're not, I don't know, not nuking their city block or something, like, because it's very hard to keep people quiet, like, particularly for anything over like 25 years. 2, so that's a big one. 2 is what I said, like, what's the likelihood of this happening in the past, and how many other conspiracies would have to be true? Like, if you have an exponential conspiracy drift, that's not going to work. And the other thing I tend to do is to very subtly show people where some of their things are contradictory, because one of the things I've noticed about hardcore conspiracists is they believe mutually exclusive things. But to be fair, truly hardcore conspiracists, I do think are actually rarer than we think. Like, when people tell me that, like, a tenth of the population believes the Earth is flat, I'm like, I don't really believe that. Like, I don't really believe that many people believe that. I don't know how you know that.
Yeah, that's a conspiracy theory.
Like, so, yeah. If just if you can keep the numbers down, if you keep the numbers of people who would have to be quiet or would have to know about it down, the odds go up pretty dramatically that it's possible. But teaching people how to recognize that is hard.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people don't realize the number of people involved in any one action are also like the number of people who aren't involved, particularly when we talk about businesses. Like, you could have a coding room for a mega, like, for example, I think about the insurance company I used to work for. Their actuarial group was probably only like 200 people for like a ton of states. And that wouldn't be that. I mean, I don't have any evidence that there ever was any conspiracies, but it wouldn't be that hard. Or you look at like Enron, which affected millions of people, but I think only like 25 or 30 people really had to be in on the take and the know. It affected hundreds of people directly and like, whole areas of the country indirectly.
Well,
but you don't have to have that many people in the know there.
And I would say that touches on something that I think gets neglected a lot, which is motive. I can definitely believe a larger conspiracy can be assembled if there is a serious financial motive, for example. With the Harvey Weinstein thing, it turned out that he was hiring this company called, I believe, Black Cube to engage in some pretty disturbing activity in order to cover up his malfeasance. And that ultimately wound up leaking, ironically, but it was apparently a lot of people working very hard to do some pretty atrocious things for him. But I can believe that they would keep that secret because, they
got paid to.
Yeah.
Well, that's where that years equation comes in. Like, think about how long it would have to be kept secret for, because the financial motive is going to be dependent on how long that payoff is continuing. And that's a dicier question. But I mean, like, yeah, that's fairly large scale. Although, like, again, when you talk about scales of magnitude, like that versus, say, 9/11 was an inside job, that's an order of magnitude difference than the number of people that have to be involved in that. So that's where things get kind of dicey. And admittedly, I don't always know how to tell people. Like, you're asking me, as I can give you a hard answer. What you haven't asked me why I quit teaching the course.
You kept red pilling everybody.
Yeah,
you kept black pilling everybody.
I kept black pilling everybody. Actually, no, seriously. I had people who would get deeper and deeper into these conspiracies by exposure. So I had 4 students who sincerely convinced themselves that the moon was a NASA conspiracy.
Whoa!
Not the moon landing, the moon.
That's some David Icke shit right there.
Yeah, and I was just like, you know what? I'm not going to do this anymore. So unfortunately, Jeremy, some of the stuff I have to say is I'm not sure that it does work. Like, I can give people on the fence a kind of guideline for figuring out what's reasonable. But I couldn't. If you're hardcore invested in conspiracy in a particular set of conspiracy theory frameworks, there's very little I can do.
Right. All right. Yeah, I don't think it's. I don't think it's. This is and I think and Aaron Gupta talked about this too. It's not necessarily a matter of like convincing the diehard, but it's almost like it's signaling little like indicators to everybody else around better directions to head in.
Yeah, that's why I frame this not in, like I said originally, not in debunking conspiracies, but figuring out which ones are reasonable. Like, what is the likelihood of it being possible? And even then, like, I don't know. I mean, like, hell, the reptoids could be real. There's almost 0% chance that it is, but it could be. There's always the weird chance that I don't understand any of the laws of physics real, and all that's a conspiracy too. There's no way for me to, with any sort of epistemic certainty, to undo that. But I can give you a lot of priors that would indicate that it's pretty unlikely.
Well, I just want to, if you start from the idea that abortion is murder, for example, and then go to the idea that the left is obsessed with abortion and loves late-term abortion, and you buy into the James O'Keefe notions about how they're buying fancy cars with their abortion money, then I think something like the idea of child sacrifice with Pizzagate is a lot more plausible. So you would have...
Oh, and I know people who believe that, and I have never been able to talk them out of it.
But what I'm saying is that they are coming from a position where it is logical for them to believe that. But for you to argue against that point requires you to go against basic premises that are just profoundly ingrained into their worldview.
Right. Yeah, and I don't think it's a matter of, like, you know, it's like you're not going to change their mind in a particular debate. You know, there's no better way to re-cement a belief system than directly attacking it.
Yeah, for sure.
Sure, but what I'm saying is that they have built a chain of logic that is reasonable to them, and unless you're willing to go back to the initial starting point and work from there, which is not feasible, realistically speaking, you know, why would they change their opinion? You know, they would.
There's no reason for them to do so unless there's a personal investment stake, which is why I never argue with those people on terms of logic.
Yeah,
I just don't. I mean, like, because I don't really necessarily, you know, that whole, like, you can't logic someone out of something they didn't logic themselves to. I don't actually think that's true entirely, but when it comes to first premises like that, like, there isn't much you can do. Like, particularly with the religious stuff, you know, with the religious stuff. And I'm not anti-religious. I go on, like, religious podcasts and stuff all the time, actually. But if you accept that worldview, and I have there's a friend of mine who does. I'm not going to name their name, but who, like, they really believe that abortion, and they're okay with Pizzagate because they also think that probably abortion's a demonic, that there are supernatural forces at work in here, and the satanic panic is probably something that they would say, you know, it's possible.
So we're connecting back to all sorts of past recent episodes here.
Well,
you know, and I don't know I really don't know how you, other than attacking their premises, are trying to soften their premises a little bit, how you would do that. Like, how you do engage with that particular subset. I mean, like, you can appeal to basic human emotion, like emotive value cores, but in terms of, like, absolute reasoning, you're right, that's a lost cause, because everything that they're saying, as illogical as it seems to us, is based off of a premise that if you accept that premise, all the other steps are logical.
Sure. Well, and similarly, if you subscribe to the idea that America is a force for good in the world, that God is a good guy, and that he tried to make a good place for us where we could struggle and learn, but still ultimately things progress really well. And then you drop in the idea that there is systemic oppression. That is a tough argument to make with somebody who has a lot of reasons to believe otherwise. And it is, in some cases, more parsimonious for them to jump to the idea that maybe certain populations, quote unquote, are just inherently inferior, and that's just how they were made.
Yep. I mean, I've actually talked to people about the one of the things that, for example, when you talk about like African American incarceration, even when you bring up the fact that we have, like, police documentation, for example, numbers of arrests and convictions being the same. Numbers of arrests being the same, but convictions not being the same. That the logical conclusion many people come to is that, well, if this is just, and I am part of a just world, then we must. Then it's a fact to conclude that minorities are more violent.
Yeah, I was listening for some reason to a debate with Sargon that somebody had, and I believe the thing that he jumped to is, well, are you saying the police are racist?
Yeah, I know, and that's hard to fight, particularly, you know, and they'll point to, for example, and this is where a lot of left liberal activists really don't help themselves. You know, for example, I recently at my school, Black Lives Matter activist came and spoke to our school, and she was talking about diversifying the FBI, and some kids started screaming about how white supremacy wasn't real, unfortunately. But also, one of the things that they said to their teacher afterwards was like, look, in Maryland, I remember looking that up. They were very young. I think at the time they probably would have been like, I don't know, like 11 or 10. But I looked up the event at Maryland. It's one of the first events in Black Lives Matter, and like those cops were black.
Yeah, that's what this is Kianga Yamada Taylor devotes a good chapter or two, I think, in her book about this, about how that with the police chief, the mayor, the governor, the attorney general, and the president at the time, it was kind of like, I don't know if every stage in between them had a lot of black folks, but there were more few. And I'm saying that we're calling from this. We're in Portland, Oregon, where they hired our police chief. They is a black woman from, of all places, Oakland PD.
Danielle Outlaw.
Still there?
Okay.
Oh, so anyway,
Yeah,
no,
I'm still here.
no, I'm just, but it's just an example. But yeah, that's kind of a. But yeah, that is.
Well,
sorry.
No, I'm with you. That's a problem, but it's also like you have two major voices, in Black Lives Matter who don't agree with each other about how to approach, police diversification, for example. But, that nuance is not that messy world if someone wants a coherent worldview. And frankly, this doesn't just apply to right-wing stuff. Like, a lot of left-wing justice narratives also have a hard time dealing with systemic stuff, even when they say they understand privilege and use that language. Like I said before, like a lot of people really want to, and like it's not just right-wingers or religious people. I mean, Sargon of Akkad's not religious. Like, he comes out of the skeptic community. Sam Harris has always been kind of more sketchy than people realize, I think. But
yeah, I mean, shit, Chris Hedges wrote about him doing this shit back in the late W era. Oh, no,
I mean, his first book, The End of Faith, the first book I remember by him, like, oh my God. Like, I remember quoting, and there's an Indian atheist who was like, he's really soft on Hindus and Buddhists and stuff and their violence, but he said, he actually outright says that that it's rational to kill people for their beliefs, leading to the potentiality of them killing someone.
Fun stuff, folks. All right, couple bits more. Because there's a separate topic that I do want to mention, but at some point there's a couple questions that I wanted to. Can we talk about how to? And again, I think a lot of this is almost like a psychology bit of, like a way to help people not contemplate, but at least be able to think of, handle the fact of, the difference between the possible versus the probable.
This really helps if people understand math, but that's like a lost cause in and of itself, right? One of the biggest hurdles I run into is narrative bias.
Yep.
And this is also true for lefties. Like, we want a story.
Yeah. We're hard.
And sometimes there isn't a story. Or there might be a bunch of stories, but there isn't a story. There's no master narrative there. There's a bunch of stochastic data. One of my favorite examples of this is, and this is like into far left territory, right? But debate over long range Kondratiev cycles, which are these ideas of like long business cycles that span like centuries. It's the debate of Marxism. Well, the problem with the debate is, in that time scale, trends are functionally the same as noise.
Yeah. So, in other words, all signal is lost.
Yeah, like it's gonna look. You can map it out. It's gonna map out on a wave, but if there's any causal or even correlative mechanism, you can't know because noise also maps out on a wave function. So so that's very hard to talk about. Like, I'm sure like a lot of our not math geeky listeners probably just glazed over. And look, this stuff matters. Like, I spent a whole 8 episodes on a podcast talking about different ways of modeling profits. And, like, if you weren't a hyper geek, I'm sure it was the most boring thing in the world, but it actually is really important for trying to talk about how capitalism actually works over time.
Yes.
And,
I'll say, one of the topics that I kind of return to from time to time, talking to people about just the utility and the beneficial aspects of like podcasts as a medium, is that you can get into deep esoteric shit like that and really kind of spin it out and work on it in real time with other people, and because it all goes to tape, that it gets recorded and folks can kind of like both listen to it and then also revisit it over time.
Yeah, as opposed to like when you would do that on like a pirate radio where you could do that, but if you weren't listening in real time, it was pretty much gone.
Yeah, and you don't have the tape player going, and you don't have the tape going.
There's that, and so to get back to that though, that's hard. That really is hard to get across a probable versus a possible. I do like to talk about priors and talk about simple ratios, like because people can get that. Simple ratios are pretty like, oh, I get 1 out of 3.
Yeah,
I can see that in my head. But once you start getting into large numbers and like marginal ratios, like like when you start dealing with scale or trying to talk to people about like just in general how statistics are used in media. I'm going to talk about something that's very close to conspiracy thinking, but like the way people can hack p-values. That's hard to explain to somebody.
Or the replication crisis.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, oh my God. Yeah.
And that does come down to it is at some point, and this is almost again we're into like where psychology and philosophy meet is ultimately how does someone deal with the lack with that lack of certainty, that lack of epistemic certainty, the fact that it ultimately we just we won't know, we have an idea, we know what is more likely and less likely, but at some point it's just kind of like that's it.
Oh yeah, I mean, and like I said, there are real conspiracies. And one of the weirder things about what I found from studying like 60s COINTELPRO, there were conspiracies that communists were taking over liberal organizations on campuses with foreign aid.
And guess what? Yeah,
it was true
and good.
And lefties get. I mean, I have leftist friends who get mad at me for saying that, but I'm like, it was true, and let's be honest, we don't even think that was wrong. Like, that's we're working with allies or something, right? Like, of course we do that, but to someone else that looks like a nefarious conspiracy, but from their perspective, they're not entirely wrong. And conversely, COINTELPRO was all up in everybody's crap. No, I mean, honestly, it wasn't just in left-wingers' crap, but it was like anybody who was marginal. Also, a lot of people from the State Department who'd taken CIA or proto-CIA money were all over the industry, left, right, and center. Like, my favorite weird fact is proto-CIA, you got Buckley. On the conservative side, you got Julia Childs, of all people.
Well, how do you get from public relations then to Wild Bill Donovan and the OSS?
Well, because then World War II came along. And in your generation, you don't realize that in mine, we were saving the world so that everybody that I knew was in the Army or the Navy or down in Washington. So that's where I went, and I got into the OSS. But having no languages and no skills, I ended up in the files, and I stayed in the files all during the war. But at least I knew what was going on.
So you actually reported to did you report to Donovan?
I was in his private office for a while. Always the files. And then I got an opportunity to go to what we called the fist squeezing unit, which was air sea rescue equipment. And then from there, I heard that they were planning to send people overseas. I knew that sometime I'd get over to France. Up to then, I'd only been in Tijuana.
You have the Frankfurt School indirectly.
Yeah, they both worked for. They both worked for the War Department, and
they both worked for the War Department, and then the Frankfurt School was brought over partly with intelligence money.
It's fun to imagine Buckley just going completely Jason Bourne on a motherfucker, like hitting him with a magazine, breaking his wrist.
He never left his desk, but in the.
But that's also true for like what's it? Gloria Steinem was also in on that.
Wait, what?
Like, yeah.
Oh no.
Like.
History is complicated and weird, and that's also the part of it is reality, and what actually happens is far weirder and more importantly far dumber than we could ever possibly accept or contemplate or, even conceive of.
Well, I know the FBI had people on Hemingway.
Oh yeah, they totally did. But also Hemingway, in the last bio we did, Dearborn has on from some Soviet archives that he actually was taking some Soviet money for something. But who knows
Wait,
for what?
what?
Yes.
Holy shit. I'm gonna need to look into that.
I'm trying to remember the specifics of it, but the FBI was on him, and apparently, he indirectly there was some Soviet money. Although anyone involved in the Spanish Civil War at all,
yeah,
would had some,
A bit sus.
Well, that period was complicated.
I mean, yeah, and everybody's doing, Orwell was, my favorite story is you hear about Marxist-Leninists complaining about Orwell being a state agent. Well, he was. He actually saw it as a socialist duty to fight the fascists, and then he saw it as a socialist duty to fight the Stalinists because of what basically happened to him in Catalonia. So he was working with the British. I mean, he was part of the British propaganda machine. That's why he knew of it so well during the war. And B, he did have people blacklisted who were communist. It's just true. That doesn't invalidate everything he said, or even said he did it for nefarious reasons. We just kind of don't know.
Yeah.
He never explicitly gave up on socialism, but it's hard to know with any of these people. I mean, it's hard to know with a lot of this. And also, I mean, a lot of the anti-communists from the 30s were born out of the fact that the Comintern was kidnapping and executing people who were fairly innocuous, even in America. And one of the weirdest things I remember reading was that in the Soviet archives, there's a time that Stalin was considering put a hit out on Mao. When he.
Oh, go ahead.
So I mean, that's all real, and it's really weird. People were the sides were super fluid, and particularly once you get into Molotov-Ribbentrop strategic detente and stuff. It was a very strange time.
Jacob, did you have a thing?
Well, I was going to say that this touches on something that we were actually discussing earlier as well, which is that I think part of the issue with conspiracy theories is that it requires you to, in a lot of cases, delve into someone's mind.
Right.
And you have to think, well, do I believe that Hillary Clinton is capable of sacrificing babies in a pizza basement? Yeah, okay. If you believe that someone is capable of doing that, then the conspiracy obviously becomes a lot easier. And even with conspiracy theorists, there's a lot of debate over whether or not Alex Jones actually believes what he's saying.
And how can we know?
Right.
I mean, to be frank, I can't know the quality of any person's mind, but B, with Alex Jones, it's very hard to know if he believes a lot of it. Although, given how much he's drunk on his show.
But at the same time, the enemy's breathing down our neck. And you got to realize that we've had a lot of game changers in this fight. And we could sit here and talk about Easter bunnies or walruses or Keebler elves or anything else we talk about, what do they call those things? Those little things, those little things. Green hops around has the little pits of gold.
A goblin?
No, those are goblins. What's the thing that hops around? Leprechauns.
Did you see some leprechauns?
I've seen a lot of leprechauns. The point is that those of us that stand against the leprechaun invasion
are being censored.
I'm having a little bit of fun right now.
Yeah, I mean, full on swigs from the goddamn bottle on camera.
He must believe a lot of it, even if it's the thing is, you can believe shit that's completely inconsistent with other shit you believe.
Yeah.
Sure.
What's cue the H.P. Lovecraft quote.
The most merciful thing in the world, I think, is the inability of the human mind to correlate all its contents. We live on a placid island of ignorance in the midst of black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage far.
About the human mind's inability to correlate all of its contents.
Yeah, his what is it? The humans is like our mercy is that we can't do that.
Yeah.
Like the consistency would utterly destroy us, according to Lovecraft. I mean,
Yeah,
but I think that's really important. I mean, my opinions, for example, on whether or not Alex Jones should be deplatformed probably are influenced to a certain extent by what extent I think he's a grifter. And similarly, even on a simpler level, if I'm going to have a debate on someone, I'm not going to go into a debate with somebody who's arguing in bad faith. It's not worth my time.
And yet, if you accuse everyone of being in bad faith, then because one of the we all know from internet arguments that you can there's no way to prove you're not acting in bad faith. Right. That's why it's so incredibly maddening when someone accuses you of it. Yet it's not unfair to have that as like a worst case heuristic for almost anybody.
Yeah. And that's kind of at the end of that is what all of this comes down to, is just it's a tool set. It's a menu of heuristics. It's a bunch of rules of thumb and like indications and kind of and hunches that you have to develop over time on how to interpret this stuff.
Yeah, and honestly, like I'm gonna say something that to be a little bit on the epistemic humility side here, and as I remind you, I am given to profound Molotov cocktails of thought. But one of the things I think about all the time is how this kind of everyday heuristic thing that I'm talking about in using Bayesian and all that analysis, that's not actually super compatible with like dialectical logic and Marxism. It's kind of not. And I don't know if I can square that circle. And so that, my way of handling that is just being honest about that. Like, I'm not sure that this worldview and this world, like this street level worldview that I have, that's very ad hoc versus this like thought out, complex, methodological, worldview, that they're actually compatible. Like, I don't know. I mean, I've had Marxists tell me that they're not. But, these are also the people who insist that, like, Lamarckian evolution is real because Engels may have wrote about it once.
Whoa.
Do we even want to begin to explain what that means to? God, I don't even know if I could.
Another 2-hour conversation that will lose most of your energy.
Yeah, anyway, we'll summarize. That was a good point, ladies and gentlemen.
We've got to get some flowers, and then we're going to start, populating them.
Yeah, and also grain seed. We got strains of wheat, and we'll start threatening people if they don't produce enough wheat, they'll be shot. So what could go wrong? Anyway, one thing I did want to bring up is on the topic of. I think a lot of internet culture does this too, and I'm occasionally it's because it's these are really easy things to fall into, but it's like we talk about ways to handle or like better ways to handle people who, so that we're how do people not just like laugh at conspiracy theorists or laugh at people who are kind of because it's like a lot of times people get modernity is victimizing, modernity traumatizes a lot of folks, and so how do we handle people who might be inclined or like drifting in some of these directions from sincere hurt?
I talked about this earlier. Like, one of the things I think about is conspiracy theories are rampant in the Southern Black community, right? They are. There's been studies on this. It's also like I kind of know it anecdotally, but you talk about people who are marginalized from any political participation, and also have been victimized by actual conspiracies.
Yeah,
Tuskegee experiment. So it's completely rational in a way.
Yeah.
Even if it's maladaptively rational, it's one of those things. So I actually start with compassion in that regard. The other thing is there are these moments when I'm listening to liberals mock Alex Jones, and Alex Jones is crazy and right wing and craven as he can sometimes be, will say something that rhymes with what I believe. Like, just kind of does. Like, it's not because I don't share a worldview with Alex Jones, but there are things where he'll hit on something like accidentally about banking, in this weird structurally anti-Semitic way that he's doing it, but that he'll hit on something that I think is in the right direction but completely misguided in its manifestation, but also based off of a bunch of premises he has, frankly, some of which are religious, that I don't know how you would deprogram, so to speak. But I can grant someone who's listening to them and then just offer them, like, look, I think this explains this easier, but if you don't accept that, I don't shun people for it. Like, I am friends with this person I talked to like I was mentioning, who totally, it isn't that hard for that person to believe that, like, Pizzagate's a thing. I don't think they do, but it's not that far out of their worldview. And one of the reasons I value talking to them is it reminds me of these other premises that I have to deal with. I've known them personally, and we have a good, we have a good relationship. And actually, I have been able to make headway with him because of my relationship to him as a person, because he doesn't think I would sacrifice babies.
Right. Pathos versus logos in terms of...
It's ethos. This is ethos.
Oh, ethos.
Yeah.
Okay,
so it's pathos versus ethos. So pathos is my emotional response, and ethos is my response to someone's character. It sounds like ethics, but it's not what it means. It's like you have an emotional response to my character because you know me. And that means that, like, our tendency to shun conservatives and stuff, look, I don't like hanging out with frog Nazis either. Like, I'm not telling you to go do that. Like, this is not a liberal appeal to, like, we can all get along, because we can't. But on some level, if you don't have some kind of ethical credibility, and you can't move in circles where some of these people are at least tangentially at, you cannot talk to them, because you're never going to outlogic them. The only thing you can really do is have them trust you enough to know that you personally are not going to kill any babies. And therefore, maybe from knowing you, they can have an imagination where other people like you also may not be trying to sacrifice a bunch of babies. Like, that's all you got. That's really the only weapon you have there. And that's an uncomfortable weapon, because it does mean going out and like subjecting yourself to stuff that you're going to find morally reprehensible.
Yeah, it's the moral part that always, I think, trips up a lot of people, because it's kind of like for a lot of folks, it's like everything is so not hyper moral, but hyper moralized that it's like, hey, no, we can't possibly do that. That person, but again, Plato or whoever, that person, but they believe the wrong thing, and either because of that are evil and bad, or they are evil and bad, thus believe the wrong thing or something. But we can't possibly deal with that, and because we'll get it'll rub off on us or something.
Yeah, it's a fear of moral contagion, and that's a real problem from us. It makes it very, very hard to do anything, and in regards to these specific issues, because, like I said, you can't logic people out of this. You can't even narrative out of this, because, like, their logic is sound from their premises. Like, Jacob's completely right about that. So the only appeal you have is appeal to people who aren't completely converted, and then your relationship to people who are. But if you believe, and I've been pushing on, I get a lot of crap for pushing this. I actually am one of those people who think, yeah, your politics should kind of reflect your deepest human values. They should. But if you say they're the same as your deepest human values, you have both a very shallow politics and a very shallow ethics. Like, so, I mean, that sounds really condemnatory, but I actually kind of believe that. Because, like, one, most people's politics is not enactable on a day-to-day basis. It's not. But, go ahead.
Oh, I had another question, but yeah, please feel free to finish your point.
Well, this cuts against almost 45 years of leftist thought on the personal being political. Like, in some degree, I actually think, yes, the personal is political. On another level, like, no, it's absolutely not. Like, you do have to have your politics, even if they reflect your deepest human wants, needs, and desires, they can't be contiguous to it, because your politics are not usually, for most people, completely realizable ever. At least not within your, like, you don't control enough of that to make it happen on your own. Like, there's no way.
Gotcha. Last thing on the topic that I did want to mention is, can we talk about the act of just asking questions?
Well, that's also useful. Because one of the things that I found is a lot of times we don't actually know what people's premises are. This is another thing that Jacob, like, that wrench you threw in, Jacob, is really important, because we just assume, like, that people's premises are either illogical entirely, and maybe they are, but first premises are hardly ever about logic, even in the secular. And secondly, like, that we are not always even, like, we tend to override people's logic for how they arrived at with what we think would be what would take someone to that point. Like, well, the straw man is like, oh, you just hate poor people, or you are of whatever class. One of the things that I haven't heard Marxists talk a lot about is the empirical studies on working class people who are generally depoliticized, but on just world theory. Working class people are not immune to just world moral ideologies, which means a lot of them, like, accept the justice of wealth. Why? Well, because it would be easier to see yourself as morally reprobate than have to deal with the idea that there is no just order at all. Like, one of those is way more scary than the other.
Yeah, that is the trick. The old line is, what's more terrifying, the fact that there's a shadowy cabal with their hands, either a shadowy cabal or some malefacting presence, all powerful presence controlling everything, or that there's not.
Yeah, there's not at all.
Yeah, there's no one there, and it's like we've been left to our old Yahweh has no problem with letting us fuck shit up for ourselves, kind of a thing.
Yeah, I mean there's a whole lot of things that you really need to think about with that, and there's this tendency that a lot of skeptics have to overly psychologize this, actually, but I do think you have to really sit with the idea that it is terrifying for people, not just for conspiracy theories, but like even like the justice of wealth, to live with this idea that there is no moral order, or if there is one, it's incredibly opaque. Like, and so simple just world philosophies just beg out for justification of victimization, even if the victim is you, right? And like, we kind of know this from studies of, like, sexual assault survivors and stuff, but a lot of people don't apply it to anything else, and it applies to economic injustice too. Or even, like, in America, for example, racial biases, like amongst people, amongst African Americans against people with dark skin is pretty high. Even against people who are essentially anti-racist and of color, they still have some of these biases because your brain wants to justify certain orders as having some kind of moral foundation, period, even if you intellectually know better. Like, that's the real scary thing, is you can know all this and it not matter to subconscious things that you're doing.
But also a bit of a clarification on the question. I think because I think there's a lot of folks, or at least, in terms of, I guess this runs up against problems of knowing whether these are people are deliberately being disingenuous. We don't really know the contents of their mind, but of people who are like, well, hey, I'm not trying to saying, like, I'm just asking questions here. I'm not trying to, like, impute any, I'm not trying to cast shade. I'm just, it's like people who are kind of like trying to accuse someone of something by, JAQ, what they call jacking off.
Yeah, I mean, just derailing, right? Like, is someone actively derailing, or they're just being intellectually curious? And I'll be honest with you, there's almost no real way to know. My personal rubric for this is that you should generally assume until you have some kind of really obviously, transparently bad faith question. that people are being intellectually curious. But I actually have a hard time asking. I'm gonna almost sound like like a social justice liberal in this, but they have a point. I have a hard time asking anyone else to adapt that as their rubric on some kind of moral grounds. Like, that's a lot of work. It's a lot of stress. And I'm also a teacher. I'm trained in how to talk to people. Like, I've been doing this for years. I've also been on the other side and can intellectually process that. I've lived in a lot of countries, and that's changed the way I view a lot of this stuff. So, like, I'm in a position to be more generous than a lot of other people would be. And so it's hard to say, like, oh, you should be more giving of your time and self and all this, like as a kind of default statement. Although I do have to kind of say, if no one's willing to do that, then you're pretty much at super loggerheads, and nothing can be changed at all.
To be concluded on the next episode of Giving the Mic to the Wrong Person.